All right, let's talk about the island nation of Vanuatu. Now, when you think of airports in a place like this, you're probably thinking holidays, right? But for Vanuatu, they're so much more than that. They're absolute lifelines. And the thing is, as our climate keeps changing, those very lifelines are now under some serious threat.
So, on a normal day, this is what you'd see. It looks pretty standard, right? But an airport in Vanuatu, it's just so much more than a place for planes to land. I mean, imagine a country that's made up of over 80 different islands. These airports are their main link to the rest of the world for everything: trade, tourism, and maybe most importantly, for connecting their own people with each other.
But then, you have this. This is the new reality. A commercial jet just sitting there in deep floodwater, completely grounded. And look, this isn't some hypothetical what-if scenario. This actually happened, and it perfectly captures just how vulnerable these island lifelines really are. It really makes you ask, right? Was this just some freak accident? Or is it a preview of what's coming?
So to really get what's at stake here, we've got to look beyond just the runway. For Vanuatu, these airports are literally the economic and social arteries of the whole nation.
Okay, take a look at this map. It really lays out the core challenge they're facing. Vanuatu is what's called an archipelago, a chain of over 80 islands. So those little dots you see, they're not just airports. You got to think of them more like bridges. They're what connect communities for everything. Commerce, sure, but also life-saving medical flights or just letting families visit each other. If these airports go down, those islands are completely cut off.
Yeah, to put it really simply, flying in Vanuatu isn't a luxury, not at all. It is an absolute necessity. It's the backbone of their economy, and it's the social glue that holds the entire country together.
And if you need a number to wrap your head around just how big of a deal this is, check this out. A report back in 2012 found that almost half, 44.9% of all jobs in Vanuatu were supported by tourism. And guess how most tourists get there? Yep, by plane. So when the airports close, a huge chunk of the economy just stops. That means people aren't getting paid and crucial supplies can't get to those outer islands.
Now, it's really easy to think of this as some problem for the distant future. But it's not. These disruptions, they've been happening for years now, and the warning signs are becoming impossible to ignore.
Just take a look at this timeline. It really shows how these damaging tropical cyclones are happening more and more often. In 2015, you've got Tropical Cyclone Pam damaging 14 airports. Fast forward to 2020, and TC Herald causes billions in damage. And then look at 2022 and 2023, boom, boom. More major cyclones forcing airports to close. The pattern here is, well, it's pretty clear. And frankly, it's very concerning. And these images, wow. These are from Tropical Cyclone Gina in 2022. On the left, that's the main international airport in Port Vila, just completely underwater. And on the right, that's the view from inside the flooded terminal. See, this is what I mean. This isn't just numbers on a chart. This is the real, tangible impact of extreme weather, shutting down an entire nation's gateway to the world.
Okay, so that's the past and the present. But what does the science say is coming next? Well, the projections are painting a very, very clear and a very wet picture.
First things first, let's get a key term down. You hear scientists talk about an extreme rainfall event. What does that actually mean? Basically, it's a downpour that's so intense, it's only supposed to have a super low chance of happening in any given year. You know, like when you hear on the news about a 1 in 100 year storm. That's what they're talking about. The big problem, though, is that what we consider rare is starting to change.
This chart really drives that point home. It shows what's projected to happen to a 1 in 20 year storm in central Vanuatu. So by 2030, which is not far away, that storm is expected to be almost 20% more intense. And by 2090, that same supposedly rare storm could dump over 40% more rain. It's like the extremes are getting even more extreme.
And this table, this really zeroes in on the future for Port Vila's airport if emissions stay high. Just look at that number in the bottom right corner. A 1 in 100 year event, that once-in-a-lifetime storm, is projected to be 75% more intense by the end of the century. Let that sink in. 75%. That is a truly staggering increase.
So, what does all this data and all these percentages actually mean for the people living there? It means that a disaster that used to be a once-in-a-lifetime event, well, that could just become a normal part of life within a single generation.
But hold on, it would be a huge mistake to think this is just about rain. The threat is way more complicated because you have a whole bunch of other climate factors all piling on top of each other.
Yeah, they're basically fighting a battle on multiple fronts. So, climate models project that the total number of cyclones might actually go down, but the ones that do form are likely to be way more severe. Then you add in rising sea levels, which is a huge problem for low-lying coastal airports. And on top of that, you've got more extreme El Niño and La Niña events. You mix all that together and you've got, well, a perfect storm of risks.
So, okay, when you're faced with a forecast that daunting, what do? What's the path forward? Well, the whole mindset is starting to shift. It's moving away from just rebuilding what was broken and towards building for resilience.
And the strategy being proposed is actually a pretty logical three-step approach. Step 1. Use all that climate science we just talked about to figure out what the real future risks are. Step 2. Plan and build infrastructure. We're talking drainage systems, terminals, runways that can handle those future conditions, not just the ones from 50 years ago. And Step 3. Make their early warning systems even stronger, so communities in the airports actually have time to prepare for floods and cyclones.
And here's one of the most critical, concrete actions that's on the table. Creating, and just as importantly, enforcing a national building code that's strong enough to withstand Category 5 hurricane winds. This is a big deal because it makes sure that when something new is built or repaired, it isn't just a temporary patch-up job. It's a long-term investment in being able to weather the next storm.
And all of this really leaves us with one final big question. For Vanuatu and for other island nations that are on the absolute front lines of climate change, this is the fundamental challenge, isn't it? How do you protect the very lifeline that connects you to the rest of the world when that lifeline is built directly in the path of the storm? The answer to that question is going to define their future.